I am. Glad you ever know it's worth no?
Good afternoon. Welcome to Concord Bookshop. We're very pleased to have you here. We're very pleased to have Cammie McGovern. Cammie was a Stegner Fellow and received the Nelson Algren Award for short fiction. Her fiction has been published in Redbook, 17, Tri-Quarterly, and other journals. Eye Contact is her second novel, the first being The Art of Seeing. Now, Eye Contact is a carefully researched novel involving a 9-year-old autistic boy who witnesses a playmate's murder. Not only is this book a real page-turner, but it addresses the important issue of how to care and educate special needs children. Cammie, you speak from first-hand knowledge?
Yes, I do, yes.
And you have a son who...
An 11-year-old. He just turned 11 with autism, that's right.
Yeah. So this is, you know, I started reading it, and I look forward to getting back to it. So it's things like, and I was a special needs teacher for 35 years, so I also have feel a lot of connection with it. But it seems like a really good book. A portion of the proceeds from this book will go to support the Whole Children in Hadley, Mass., a resource center for families raising children with special needs. Also, we're a independent bookshop, and we'd appreciate whatever you could do to help us by buying the book, and Cammie will be signing it afterwards. So without any further ado, here's Cammie.
Thank you so much for being here. And that was a lovely introduction, and I am happy. I'm not going to read for too long. I'm going to read a little section from the beginning of the book that kind of sets up the story. And then I actually think it's, I'm always most interested in just any questions, answering any questions that people have. And as you just heard, I am the mother of a son with autism, and so my careful research has actually been life for the last 11 years. And I'm happy to talk about that. And also the center that I started with a group of friends that's been a really wonderful offshoot of this whole journey of parenting my son. Okay, this is not the very beginning of the book, but it's where the mother of the little boy Adam has been called down to his school because he's gone missing, and she's sitting in the principal's office. Now, at age 30, Kara sits in the office of her old elementary school, waiting for Margot Tessler, the principal, to return and tell her what's going on with her son, who's been missing long enough for her to have been called down here. Most of the time, Kara forgets that she went to this school some 20 years ago, that if walls could talk, these corridors could speak to a long history of her own failures and successes. It only occurs to her in odd moments, kneeling beside a coat cubby as Adam negotiates his way out of snow pants. She'll see a heating vent and remember her and Suzette bored, decorating the slats and tiny ballpoint pen hellos. And she'll lean over to see if coats of beige paint might not have erased evidence of her old, now dead friendship. Though Kara never came to the principal's office as a child, she knows this office well now, with its wall-to-wall bookshelves and conference table big enough to accommodate Adam's yearly education plan review, which sometimes involves 8 people hammering out goals, benchmarks, the accommodations necessary as the curriculum grows more demanding with each year. Strangely, Kara has happy associations with being in this room. She isn't friends with any of these people, but she also isn't adversarial, as she suspects some parents of special needs kids are. with the bottomless list of requests and demands. Kara takes the opposite approach, baking cookies for all her meetings, distributing fudge every Christmas, writing elaborate yearly thank you notes to everyone on staff, because she's always believed what her mother taught her, that kindness breeds kindness, and if she thanks people and thanks them again, Adam's world might be cushioned by a bit of remembered gratitude. So far, Kara would argue, her approach has worked. Even when she walked in here, Shirley, the principal's secretary, caught her eye and said, "We love Adam, sweetheart, and we're all going out of our minds. He'll turn up in a minute." Kara nodded and mouthed, "Thank you." Adam is loved, by the adults of the school anyway, who always talk about his big smile, the dancing joy on his face when he comes in from recess. Though he's still, at age 9, capable of the occasional inexplicable tantrum that embarrasses everyone, he can also be magically uncomplicated. Offered the promise of a gumdrop or a chance to listen in on afternoon band practice, he nearly explodes with delight. "No, really?" he'll say, a favorite new expression. "No, really? A gumdrop?" In the middle of an elementary school full of children aging too rapidly, dressing like pop stars and carrying cell phones, Adam is, for some of these grandmotherly types, the perfect eternal child, happy with the mundane, a pile of wood chips, a tuft of dryer lint, nothing really. One year, even the principal's sensible Margot, with her boxy orthopedic shoes and terrible crocheted vests, ended an IEP meeting by saying, "Adam is a jewel, Kara, and we all love him. I just wanted to tell you that." Kara has always taken such comments as hopeful beacons for the future. Adults love him, and one day he'll be an adult too. The implication in her hopeful heart's logic, loved then too, appreciated by people who are his age, not 30 years older. It's a stretch, though, and it requires more work every year to stay optimistic about Adam's future in the face of the growing gap between him and his peers. He's in 3rd grade now, and the list of things he can't do grows longer every year, more exacting, and in her mind more ominous. He can't tell time, can't grasp abstract time concepts, yesterday, tomorrow, next week. He can't play card games. He still adds 2 dice by counting dots. "Shouldn't he be good at this math stuff?" a teacher once asked, thinking obviously Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman. "He's not," Kara said in a rare, curt moment. Autistic kids are all very different, and math is Adam's weakest subject. He's fine with reading, fine, grade level. She said this emphatically, though there was actually some question about this too. A lower score on comprehension than he'd gotten 6 months earlier, which she has to investigate but hasn't gotten around to because there's so many gaps, so many deficits now, countless questions that run through her mind every night. Why worry about reading when the math is so low? Why worry about math when he is still 3 days out of 7 not dressing himself? Why worry about any of these things when it's been nearly a year since he's had a play date? Recently, she's been falling asleep every night stewing about play dates, thinking I've got to try another one soon. Kids like Adam well enough, or at least they don't mind coming over and playing with his things. Sometimes she'll get the type who will spend the whole time talking to her, and she'll watch sweet Adam in the corner, hands clasped in joy at the ease of this get-together, how smoothly it's going, as if he wants to say, "I love my mother, and look, so do you." Afterward, she'll have to go over it all, remind him that one has to talk to people to be their friend, has to answer questions, has to, for instance, say hello. And Adam's face will fall slowly, take in what she is saying in pieces, that it hasn't really been a success, that friendship requires something more complicated than standing in the same room, among the same toys, though Kara, with her own history of failed friendships, can hardly say with any certainty what this should be. The whole enterprise makes her sad, unable to think about the great gray morass of Adam's future. Math isn't his weakest subject, really. His weakest subject is life and everything about moving through it. Last week, lost in his own thoughts, Adam very nearly followed the wrong woman off the bus. Kara had to reach out, snap his coat hood, and bark, "Adam, look up." "Oh, oh, oh," he said, his face awash in gratitude and relief, almost lost and then saved. He pressed his forehead against her chest, gasped and giggled and almost cried as he said over and over, "You're okay, you're okay." 9 years old, and in a panic he still reverses his pronouns, still echoes words of comfort exactly as they've been given to him. "You are okay," she said, ruffling his hair as he stood rocking beside her, her baby boy, her preteen, his cheek pressed oddly to the side of her breast. Now Margot Tessler huffs into the room and sits down across from Kara to explain what happened. Phil, Adam's regular aide, was out sick today, and Teresa, Adam's usual sub, already had an assignment, so he had someone new today, a Mrs. Warshawski, who misunderstood what she was told and believed that recess was her break time. Kara stares at her. Until this moment, she hasn't been terribly worried. She assumed he'd be found in one of his strange places, behind a vending machine, under the piano in the music room, that soon there would be some forced laughter and general embarrassment about the commotion this caused. Now she's less sure. He went out to recess alone? The playground supervisors were told they were perfectly aware, but he was outside when he disappeared. Margot meets her gaze and nods. Yes. Kara stands up. She hasn't considered the idea that he might have been outside, might have really disappeared. She needs to get out there and start looking in all the spots Adam is most likely to have gone. He must have heard something, Margot, a lawnmower maybe, or some music. Did you check the maintenance room? Sometimes they leave their radio on. We checked. He's not there. Kara gathers her things. How about the music room? Is the band practicing? We looked. They're not. Adam can hear things other people can't. If one kid is playing violin somewhere in the building, he'll probably hear it and try to get closer. Margot comes around the desk. We've got people looking inside and outside. Let me go find him, Margot. I'm sorry this has caused such a disruption, but I'll find him. He can't have gone far. In the old days, when Adam was younger and more driven by his compulsions to investigate machines, heating vents, water faucets not completely turned off, Kara lost him more often than she liked to admit. She knew the panic, the speed with which he could disappear, and she also knew intuitively how to find him. Stop. Listen hard for his humming, his tiny throaty bird noises, or for what he must have heard. Music, maybe, or the low, compelling purr of a machine come to life. They may ask for that in a minute or two, Kara, but for now you need to stay here. They? Who is they? The police. The police? How long has he been gone? A little over an hour. There's a girl missing too. The police say they think that's a good sign, that it diminishes the possibility of stranger abduction. It's virtually unheard of for someone to take 2 children at once. Kara tries to swallow but finds it hard, her mouth filling up with something she can't bear the taste of. She nods but doesn't sit down. What happened, Margot? Why wasn't anyone watching him? There was actually more supervision than usual. 6 adults were outside when it happened. There was no stranger on the playground, no unknown cars in the parking lot, no unusual interactions that anyone saw. We're talking to the 3 classrooms of kids who were outside at the time, trying to find out if any kids talked to them. dared them to hide maybe as a practical joke, or to walk over to the woods. The woods, she thinks. Beyond the soccer fields, on the far side of the playground, there's a lovely wood glade of pine trees that gives the school its name, Woodside Elementary. Let me go outside, Margot. Not yet. They're doing a systematic search, and for now they ask that you stay here. Kara looks out the window. What do they think happened? They think it was a prank. Someone picked two vulnerable kids and told them to do something stupid. Margot shakes her head in disgust. That's why I called the police so fast. I want whoever's responsible for this to understand they're in big trouble. In the past, Kara hasn't worried excessively about bullying. Riding the bus with Adam the first week of school, as she does every year, she got a glimpse of how little he registers to other children. They walk past him, look through him, hardly see him beyond the obvious oddity of a third grader riding the school bus with his mother. It's sad, of course, and also a relief. If bullies have an intuitive sense for who will burst into tears most easily, most spectacularly, it isn't Adam. He might hum or walk away, but in all likelihood he will hear very little another child says to him. She has to be honest about this, has to remind herself often to remain clear on who Adam is and what he's capable of. If another child told him to do something I don't think he would, that's not like Adam. You never know, Kara, he's changing. Adam's changed a lot this year. In any other context, Kara would take this as a cause for celebration. He's changing, even the principal noticed. Now it only seems worrisome. Who is the girl? Amelia Best, Margot says as a question, as if hoping this name might ring a bell, which it doesn't. She's new this year, 4th grade. She's been at this school, 6 weeks? Unusually pretty little girl, very... Margot tries to find the right word. Blonde. Adam has disappeared with a notably pretty little girl. For the first time in years, she thinks of her 5th grade fixation on Kevin Barrows and panics. Are you sure they're together? We don't know. We know Adam better than we know her. We noticed Adam was missing first because it's so unlike him. He's so compliant these days that when he didn't line up at the first whistle, Sue knew something was wrong and called the office right away. Is it possible an older kid came over from the high school or middle school? Margot presses her fingertips together. Theoretically, they're not allowed, but it's possible. The middle school sits within viewing distance of the elementary school, up a hill with some soccer fields in between. So, Kara, I'm afraid I have to ask, where is Adam's father? Kara looks up. She hasn't expected this. He's not in the picture. This is her standard answer, the one nobody ever presses her past. Right, I know that, but where is he? I'm only asking because the police have asked several times. Apparently an absent father is the first place they look. Kara feels her mouth go dry. I don't know who his father is exactly. Margot raises her eyes in surprise. Oh, so he's never been in the picture. No, he wouldn't know at all anything about Adam. There's no chance he's involved in this. Kara shakes her head. None. Margot holds her hand up. That's all I need to know. She looks out the window of her office as if she's contemplating going out there right now, telling someone this. Then she turns back with a new thought. Do you think if Adam was out on the playground, he could have heard a radio maybe playing in the woods? Kara's stomach begins to pound like a second heart. Let him not be in the woods, she prays. Yes, she said softly. He could have heard something no one else did. Would he have gone if, say, he heard voices? No, she whispers, because she can't bear the fact that she isn't sure. Adam is her life, her constant companion, the boy she gave up any other life for, but there is a truth to what Margot says. In the last few years, he has been changing. There's a new bravery to him at times, old fears mysteriously dropped. Even in this brief school year, there have been occasions when she warned the teacher needlessly. Adam can't handle fire drills. Adam won't do well in regular PE. Both times she's been wrong. She's underestimated her son. Suddenly, there's a flurry out in the hallway. 2 secretaries stand up at once. Through the glass window of the principal's office, Kara can see one of them look directly at her and then away. When the door handle turns and the woman leans in, Kara doesn't look up. They found him, Kara. Adam is all right. They're bringing him out now. Kara exhales, her relief so huge she cannot speak. Where was he? In the woods, so he may have some scratches. And the girl, did they find her too? Yes. Is she okay? No. What happened? They found her body. On that cheerful note. And hopefully people won't be shy about asking questions. The rest of the story it involves trying to, Adam, in the wake of having witnessed whatever it is he witnessed, withdraws and retreats, and the police quickly give up on him, and the rest of the story is his mother and others trying to figure out what he knows and reading his clues as he is able to give them, to figure out what he saw and what happened and what he was doing out there in the first place.
Why did you choose to write fiction when you so obviously could have written?
Nonfiction, that's actually a wonderful question. I started, when my son was 4 years old, I got it in my mind. I've always been a fiction writer for 20 years, so I had an MFA and Stegner and all that he had. So fiction was what I did, but I thought in the wake of having my son and this experience that I would try and write a memoir. And then the interesting thing that I discovered in trying to do that, I did a portion of a book and a book proposal, which is what you do when you're thinking of writing nonfiction. And what I was told by my agent and an editor that I asked the advice of was that in a book, that with a nonfiction book like that, you would need to have, that's the story of parenting a child with special needs, that the ending would need to be, if not one about the child's recovery, that it would be about that there would certainly be, the door would be open to that possibility at the end of it. And at that time, there's now a great range of books out there about mothers especially, but parents of children with autism, and writing about the experience, and one particular therapy that was really helpful. And they're extraordinarily useful, but they can, and at the time when my son was first diagnosed, that the weight of those memoirs initially, or of those kinds of books, is that they are, you read them obsessively at first, and then they become kind of oppressive because your own experience isn't getting mirrored, and that what has happened to a lot of these kids, there's an explosion of autism, as people may already know from all the news coverage, but that it's increased 800% in the last 15 years. The experience of most people, some kids do recover, some kids do leave behind the diagnosis, but the vast majority simply get better, that they improve, there's a great range within the autistic spectrum, but that notion of leaving the whole thing behind is one that is leaving all of autism behind is very difficult for a lot of parents, because it's not happening. Your child is still autistic, he's still struggling with a lot of things, no matter how hard you've worked and no matter how hard you've tried. And I wanted to write a book where that was the story. The kid still had autism at the end of it, and what we saw, though, was that there's still the possibility of a life, of resolution with that, of that there could even be something like a happy ending, that where the kid is surprising his mother with what he can do, but it is, there's a kind of a peace arrived at with it. And it was almost like I felt like at that time I couldn't do that with nonfiction, that I needed to write a story where something else was the story, and part of the point was let's all figure out a way to make peace with our autistic kids to a certain extent. That was a long answer. Oh, it goes so long.
Well, tell us about the place in Hadley.
Oh, aren't you sweet? that was a group of other mothers that I met when my son was in preschool, who have kids with different special needs. Down syndrome, Williams syndrome, and CP, just a variety. And that variety was a nice blueprint for what's now happened with it. We run after-school classes it started with a lot of gymnastics classes, and we have a site that's a big gymnasium, kind of a sensory and OT place. Now we run classes in music, art, yoga, martial arts, everything, 7 days a week. Do a lot of homeschooling stuff, and we serve almost 300 children in Western Massachusetts.
Is that where you live, in Hadley?
I live in Amherst.
Amherst.
Yeah. And so it serves, actually, people come down from Vermont and Connecticut. And I think that what we've learned, a few things, is one, that kids with special needs have an incredible need for recreation opportunities, and even more so, as much as typical peers, or even much more so, for the opportunities it provides for socializing and learning, all the learning that accompanies those kind of recreational activities. And also that bringing kids, we're so correctly focused on mainstreaming kids in school, but when you just get kids who have a variety of special needs together, they find there's a wonderful opportunity for them to balance each other's weak points. That my son often makes friends with kids that have physical disabilities because he sees that he can help somebody walk down the balance beam. It's not going to be complicated. There's some intuitive thing that he understands. Someone with Down syndrome is going to be easier for him. It's not going to be such a fast conversation and so difficult. And he seems to have intuited. We see that a lot. So it's actually worked really well, I think. And
how old are the children in your program? It
goes from infants, and we're now starting a teen program because our kids are getting to be teens and clearly.
Infants.
So we got to, whole children, we got to think of how we're going to shift that name. It's got to turn to whole children and young adults at some point. So it goes from all ages.
Sounds like the stress is on physical activity.
A lot of movement and learning through movement.
Do they have a
which
track
is
for running?
No, that's a nice idea, but no, not yet. We do a lot now.
Not original with me.
We go out and do, like, there's a soccer program, there's golf, there's tennis, so there's a lot of satellite recreation programs around the area.
Back to your book.
Oh.
How did you get the idea to have a crime, or why a murder?
Oh, I had always loved reading mysteries and crime books, and theoretically I was more of a literary writer. Like, you go to the MFA programs and there's not you don't talk a ton about genre stuff if you were a writer, and you so I never would have thought myself able to take on writing a crime mystery book like that. But then I just got this idea when my son was first learning to talk. He did this echolalia. If anybody knows autistic kids, and some people do, they often learn when they're first starting to talk that they're just repeating things that they've heard during the day. And with my son, it was always these ghastly, strange, people know autistic kids, very odd little snippets, and for him it was these warnings or these things that probably had scared him during the day, like, sit down, hands to yourself, or if it was somebody who had spoken with an accent, he loves accents, can repeat them perfectly. So he would always in the bathtub run through this little tape recording in his mind of the peculiar things that had been barked at him during the day.
Bark 'em back.
And he'd bark them back, right, exactly. And I thought, God, what if everything hung on whatever this little, what if people were really listening to what he was saying, and it was possible that he was repeating what somebody, like he was had some bit of information that everybody needed to get. So suddenly it just seemed like, oh, a kid witnessing a crime, that's a neat idea. And then I wrote a draft that was sort of like had a little murder in the beginning, and then was all about what I thought was so interesting at the time, just the therapies I did with my son. And it was all about all the different things you can do with your autistic kid. And my husband read it and said, why don't you just write a murder mystery? Why don't we find out who killed the girl? Because that's what I'm interested in. And so I just launched in, and I tried. I went and interviewed police that worked with juvenile specialty, had, kind of child specialty, and detectives and that kind of thing, and just tried to learn how one does it and take the dive. It's harder than you think, actually, writing mysteries.
So did you start with the memoir idea and go immediately to that?
Then I left it behind, and I have been writing for so long and have so many unworkable ideas and half completed, and this was one of many. And I had published this book and was in the middle. Then I just got I sort of had written half of this one and put it aside, and then maybe 3 years later, I was, if anyone's already read the book, there's a kind of subplot with some junior high kids who are perhaps on the spectrum, on the other end of the autistic spectrum, which would be very high functioning kids, but there's one boy that's in a social skills group who becomes obsessed with the crime and befriends them and becomes a kind of assistant detective, befriends Kara and Adam, the mother and son. And I had been researching social skills groups to try and start one at the elementary school where my son was. And so I went to the middle school where they were running some, and those kids and those guys are so adorable and sweet and amazing, really. The lack of the usual adolescent affectation, this sort of honesty, and they're genuine. And one of the most charming things about autistic kids is the capacity for passion, that when they love something, they love it so completely that it actually teaches us all about loving your obsessions. And so I just got the idea of maybe I could go back to that murder book and have this kid come in and sort of help it move it along towards the end.
Are you planning on writing a memoir someday, do you think?
No, I think what I learned from that is that is its own thing, and that's its own. It's much harder than you think, and to get good at it might take me as long as it took me to get good at writing fiction. I honestly thought, and heaven forbid, because I've been at this for 15, 20 years. I hate to say how long I've been at this. I just thought it was interesting of how you choose what you tell and how you present things, like your relationship with your own parents or your marriage or where you're dipping down and telling a scene. There were a zillion choices to be made, and choosing tone and where you're sort of being flippant. And I just thought, wow, and I love reading memoirs, and it's incredibly hard to figure out the right tone. Maybe you could just click into it, but mine was not very good, actually, as it turned out. Somehow it was all much easier to put into fiction for me.
Plus it seems like sometimes in fiction you can almost be more open or more less cautious, like, you know, in some novels you read them and you think, wow, this person was writing this nonfiction, no one would read it, but as a novel it's sort of more compelling almost.
Well, aren't you sweet to say that? What's
I think
interesting
that
is nonfiction, as a general rule, sells more and people are more interested. I'm actually not, this one I'm hoping crosses the, the hope would be that the general reader would pick this up and for a good story and learn something about, here's what this autism epidemic is like, and here's what a family would look like. As a general rule, your nonfiction memoir will sell twice as much as fiction. I don't know if that would necessarily be true, though, in this particular case.
Well, I think it would be true. There's a book called Memory Keeper's Daughter, and
That one's,
it makes me think of a different, and our book club just read that, and so many people weren't aware of what it was like in the 60s when I had my child, so I was. And it was amazing discussion, and I was just sitting here thinking this would be a great book for our book club as well.
aren't you sweet?
Well, no, it's well written from what you've read, and it is a good way of getting some people who aren't close to these, special needs and children. It's not as frightening to them, maybe, to read it through a novel with another.
That's what I'm actually hoping. Because the truth is, with the statistics as they are, and many people here are nodding, but in the mid-'80s, autism was diagnosed 1 in every 5,000 kids. And now the CDC came out and it's 1 in 150.
Very scary.
And 1 in 94 boys will be diagnosed. And there's it's not entirely clear why that is. But it is very true that everyone will know an autistic kid sooner or later. And that especially for the younger ones, the way all kind of connection and relation initially happens is through sympathetic adults in their world, that they can't really begin to learn to connect to peers who don't have time or patience to put up with that. But I am hoping that there's a kind of, just as there are more books and more stories and more movies out there, that people will kind of begin to see what this picture looks like and what it takes to, that these aren't kids who want to withdraw into their own world, that they, in fact, that's perhaps one misconception about autism. It's not a wishing only to be lost in their own world. It's that all the difficulties of making connections and pragmatic language get in the way, and that part of what is difficult is the how to reach out. But once they do make the connections, it's extraordinary, and it's amazing. They are amazingly loving and amazingly connected, and there's a lot of them that are coming of age, and it's going to be, we're all kind of figuring out what is going to be the place in the world for them.
There's discussion. I assumed it was for book club. Discussion questions in the back of the book.
It has been somebody's read, one of the book club, it put it number 2 for the spring, picks or something, and Reader's Guide, so that there's other discussion questions besides this one. So I'm hoping that is, I hope. How about one last question?
What does your son think about the book?
That's an interesting question. My son is still, to a certain extent, it is a gift. He's a little bit oblivious to his differences. He is by and large a really happy kid who doesn't realize how bad he is at so many things. There's some ways that he's a lot like Adam early on. He's now is a little higher functioning than the boy in this book. But he would say there was a lot of, when the hardback came out, there was a lot of pictures of he and I in magazines, because I wrote a lot for magazines and the New York Times, and so it felt like we were, and I wondered if that would impact him in any way, and honest to God, I don't think he keeps saying, I'd like to read Eye Contact someday, but it's not with any connection to any of this. And what's interesting now, it's his younger brothers. We have 2 other sons, and there's a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they talk a lot more about it, and a lot more, they get asked about autism, and the 7-year, not the 4-year-old, that would be a bit much. And so I'm hoping that there's some way that this is just opening up the conversation for all of us. I hope Ethan wouldn't say I'm autistic yet it's around. I mean, he's just not quite there. Hopefully someday.
Actually, one more question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about how the book's being marketed, or how, is this your second book tour then, if it's a new paperback versus hardback?
Yeah,
is
you
it
do.
Primarily a mystery, or are you reaching out to like the mystery
See, I would
community?
argue it shouldn't be marketed primarily as a mystery. It should be marketed as the book in which you have kind of a way into understanding autism, plus with a nice little story. I think that that would be what they're trying to try. It's trying to be reaching the general population, not necessarily just parents of, or people affected by autism. It's hard to say, because basically, I think that when you're in book marketing, and perhaps the booksellers can speak to this, but you just desperately market any possible way you can, and you take any venue you possibly can, and you try everything and hope that
Oprah hasn't discovered you yet.
Right.
there we
Oprah
go.
calls.
Yeah.
That's
I'm gonna drop her a
right.
note.
Bless her heart, that's right. I thank you all so much for coming.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming.